Hello and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security and Antisyphon Address Space Layout Randomization. I am joined only by Ryan today, which is fine because, Ryan and I, we got this thing going. We got it locked down. Ryan, when are you getting on an airplane and coming out to Deadwood?
I'm getting on an airplane on Saturday,
Okay,
so
awesome.
a little bit
So
early.
he's going to escape the land of Florida and come up to South Dakota and experience the cold for a little while. So
That will be refreshing, to be honest.
be something different, right? At the very
Yes.
least. So as always, this is brought to you by Black Hills Information Security. We do pen test hacking things. We break into stuff, and we also have Security Operations Center services. So if you want a SOC, let us know. Consulting at Black Hills Infosec and anti-siphon security training. We do stuff like this, but for money, which is weird because we're doing it for free. But yes, we actually have full training, including the whole pay what you can stuff, which by the way, there's a pay what you can class. I think Ryan can grab that link. Coming up the week after next, I'll be jumping right
Yeah.
into a pay what
I'll
you
pop that in the chat.
can. I think it's the Intro to SOC Core Skills class. So if you're broke, you don't have money, and you'd like to get a job in computer security, this is a great place to start. It worked for me. All right, so let's go ahead and let's jump straight in. We're actually going to be talking about one of my favorite tools in the land of forensicators. It's volatility, and I want to let me share my screen. I just absolutely love this tool um, because it is such a just fantastic utility for doing forensics analysis. So let's share that screen. There's the button. Magic. We'll be spending most of the time in screen share today. All right. And it's by the Volatility Foundation. And by the way, they have contests, they have workshops, they have training. They are a fantastic group of individuals that are doing a tremendous amount for the community. So be sure to check them out. But basically, what it does is it allows you to take a dump of memory, which is just a horrible bit of phrasing, but it allows you to take a memory dump from a computer. And then you can basically do analysis on that memory dump as though you're sitting at that computer system with a number of different built in scripts and utilities. It's all written in Python, and it's just really good. But I'm going to give you a little bit of history because if you were to see other videos that I've done on volatility, I have a complaint about older versions of volatility, and it isn't a complaint about volatility per se, but about Microsoft and what they did in relation to symbol lookup tables. So let me actually just show you the problem. So I'm going to go over to the virtual machine. And this particular memory dump that we're looking at is the memory dump that I use in my Intro to Security class, Intro to SOC Core Skills. So the command line usage, we're using Volatility 2.6, Win64 standalone. We're giving it a memory dump. Now, this particular memory dump is a VMem file. Now, the VMem file is a suspended snapshot file in VMware, which is great. If you have a server or something that you believe to be compromised, all you really need to do is just do a snapshot, and then you can do memory analysis against that snapshot to try to identify malware, compromised connections. And one of the reasons why this is really super cool is because it doesn't involve you interacting with the attacker or the system in any way other than dumping the memory off the hypervisor. Specifically, I'm going to be running the NetScan module, and NetScan itself is the module that'll look for network connections, and this is really where the problem exists. The other problem is this, and once again, this is not a problem per se, and as it relates to volatility, but what Microsoft did. So let me give you a little bit of background. What Microsoft did is it used to publish on a website all the different symbol lookup tables for different memory locations of core parts of the operating system. So you could query this database and it would tell you where in memory you would go for a specific version and build of Windows to get process information or to get network connection information. And they would give you that, and volatility would plug right into it, and life was good. However, Microsoft realized that it's possible for attackers to utilize this, and they shut down that access or severely limited it. So here in a second, I'm running Volatility, an older version, and we're running NetScan by itself. and it's going to take a few moments for it to run. And it starts out looking pretty solid. I mean, if we jump in here, you can see that we got a bunch of services controller hosts and their process IDs associated with those different services. And we got Chrome is there, service controller host. Oh crap, what's this? Look at that. Process ID is -1, and it's not giving us an actual executable. Oh, that's a problem. Especially since in this lab, right here that I have highlighted with the arrow, that's my malware. This is a process called trustme.exe. Now, that is an issue. In fact, whenever I opened an issue with the great folks of Volatility, they pointed out it was an issue with simple lookup tables. And some of the people, not the actual developers, but some of the people were like, that basically, well, no one ever looks at network connections. And it was nice because some of the people that worked in the Volatility project corrected them. And lots of people look at network connections, especially as a good starting place. Because in my class and whenever I teach incident response, I always say start with the open network connections or even the closed network connections. And the reason why I say that is you have to start somewhere, right? You have to start someplace. You have to begin, and trying to go through every single process is a pain in the ass. So we can look at the network connections. So right off the bat, looking at this, we have an internal connection on SMB, the 192.168.146 on port 445. And then we have this weird port on this DigitalOcean IP address here. But that's not enough information for me to dig in. And this has always been a bit of a problem in my class. So what a number of classes did in the past is you use a Windows 7 VM. And you created your memory image from Windows 7, and all of it worked fine for older versions of Windows. And if you move to Windows 10, you kind of got lackluster results. The other thing that happened is if you try to run something like malfind, looking for malware in Volatility, once again, it has to have the specific areas it's going to look for a specific Windows profile. In this situation, it's a Windows 10 64-bit memory dump, and it just puked. But the other ones seem to work okay. Like if I was to run PS list like that, it's able to give me the processes and actually gives me a pretty good rundown of all the processes. But today, we're going to talk about how Volatility3 takes care of a lot of those issues. So I'm going to start with the NetScan module. And I'm running this in Linux under Windows subsystem for Linux. And just absolutely love it. Just Python 3, vol.py. We're going to give it a file to analyze. And the file is Mount C Tools Volatility 26 Win64 standalone. I'm giving it the path to the memory dump, the exact same memory dump we have here. So we're looking at the same memory dump with two different tools. And we're looking at that same snapshot file, but now we're telling it Windows NetScan. Now, while I'm going to go ahead and rerun that so you can see what it looks like whenever it's actually working, but it takes a really long time for it to run. And one of the reasons it takes a while is it has to go and it has to build the symbol lookup tables and pull those down. So it takes a lot longer to do the analysis, but boy, oh boy, is it nice what you get out of it. So let me show you why I like it so much. We still have all that beautiful information on what's listening on which ports, right? Like I can see that we have 608 is listening. That's SVC host. That's nice. We got process ID with the system process ID here. So far that's great. We've got Chrome is running. That's awesome as well. But the big thing is this one right here, or these two actually that I wanted to talk about. So the first one is showing us that we have a connection with another internal RFC 1918 IP address on port 445. And that is a standard SMB connection. And this is a different IP address from the one that we're currently doing the analysis on. So it's not 0.0.0.0. That means it's listening on a specific port. This is basically saying it has an established network connection made to 192.168.192.146 on port 445. That means the system is communicating to another system. Now, that could be a file share. But in my lab, it's just another workstation. And if your workstations are talking to each other at all, that's bad. They should not be talking to each other. And now we get into another weird Windows thing, not event ID, process ID for it's the system process. This effing sucks. This just proves that Microsoft hates anyone that's doing forensics. If you actually make a network connection between two Windows computer systems, it's not the process that like cmd.exe that's making that connection. It's actually using like the net command or conhost to make that connection. You're going to see that here in a couple of seconds. And the process that's doing that is the system process, which is just annoying as hell. But as bad as that is, with Volatility3 and hooking into symbol lookup tables, this magic is back. So now it's giving us the process ID is 5452 and trustme.exe. Now, I've done other videos with the older version of Volatility where we went through this. This is just kind of updating that. But now we're getting the process name and we're getting the process ID. Now, what's interesting is it's actually coming back as closed. And the reason why it's closed is just the beaconing nature of Meterpreter. So if you actually look at how a Meterpreter makes a connection, I think it's a 30-minute connection. It makes a connection and then it resets the connection, I want to say, every 30 minutes. But I could be wrong on that. Someone might correct me in the comments. And it reestablishes. So whenever I did the memory dump, it's just Meterpreter was in the middle of killing the connection and reestablishing it. One of the cool things about memory analysis in Windows is even though that connection's dead, it still exists in memory for a little while. And we're able to see that that connection is still logged, but it's a closed connection. So it means at this time of this dump, this was closed, but that doesn't mean it wasn't reestablishing the connection at a later date. So that's really, really super cool. And all that explanation that I just gave on NetScan, it took it about that long to actually go through and do PDB scanning on the memory dump and then doing the lookup tables on it. And it's still running, actually. You see, I still haven't gotten my cursor back yet. So it takes a long time, but once again, it is absolutely the bomb when you're doing forensics. And if you're an MSP or you're a security team, if you can get somebody on site to do a memory dump, there, it just finished. So I ran it. It probably took like 5 minutes for it to run on the full, I think it's a 2 gig memory dump. It might actually only be 1. But to be able to do this type of analysis and not interact with the host directly is just magical. So that is the network connections. You also have the good old process connection, process listing as well with PS list. So I'm going to show you the 2 sets of processes that I love to look at when I'm doing analysis. Once again, we have all these SVC hosts, which is a nightmare. That's also one of the reasons why it's so critical to do live forensics on a system. So you could do task list space /SVC. So you can figure out what the hell all these SVC hosts are. It'll tell you what the name of the services are that are running out of them. So if you're ever doing a memory dump, you're going to want to come over. Let me just grab a command prompt real quick and show you that. You're going to want to run task list space /SVC space /SVC. And it's going to dump all of your SVC hosts. But for every process ID, it's going to tell you what is the service that was started out of that. So it really helps when you're doing a memory dump to dump this so you can get some sanity on what all of these different SVC hosts actually are. So that's a nightmare. So you got to always do that live forensics task list space /SVC so you can kind of marry these two up when you do it. But down here is where you start to see the network connections, or at least the processes that started out the network connections on this particular computer system. So we can see trustme.exe, its process ID is 5452. Its parent process is 3616. And if I go up to 3616, that's actually explorer.exe. That's the Windows GUI. So that tells me the user double clicked it. And that's just something you learn when you're doing this stuff a lot. It's just if somebody double clicks something, then Explorer is what actually starts that, which is crazy, right? Because you see that trustme.exe 3616, and then you also see chrome.exe is 3616, and those are all started out by Explorer. So somebody double clicked Chrome, went to a website, downloaded the executable, and ran it. So that's what that means whenever you see that that's the explorer.exe is the parent process for that. But now we can see trustme.exe. Now before you had no connection, right? You had absolutely no connection at all. Looking at the network connections here, where you have your closed connection for your malware. Actually, right here, where we were running volatility with NetScan on a Windows system. Here, let's go ahead and run that. Just go NetScan. You were getting -1 for the process IDs. So you weren't able to actually get a good start. But now in Volatility 2, you can now start tying this together. So we can see we have weird network connections. We have this 4444 network connection is process ID 5452, and it's trustme.exe. Now we look at processes and we see that trustme.exe is the main process that's executing here. It was started by Explorer, but now we can see that this 5452, it invoked cmd.exe as well. We also see that at roughly the same time that this was dumped, we had the net command was ran, and cmd.exe was ran as well on connection host. So that's your system process making network connections, because they were using net use space / the IP address of the remote system, like $. So that's how they were making that remote connection through the net command. So we're able to see that process hierarchy on how these various connections are actually being made, which I just think is so cool that it's back to working, and it's working really well. You can also look at the process hierarchy on the system by using windows.pstree. Windows.pstree. And this basically starts with what is the parent process. Like you can see that the system process begat smss.exe. smss.exe begat another process called csrss. And it also started winlogin. And you can see that hierarchy. Like you can see Explorer started Chrome because the user double clicked. We can also see cmd.exe, connection host, and trust me in here as well, are all underneath Explorer, because we're able to see that tree of what processes begat what other processes. And really, if you're looking at malware on a system, it really looks like a rat's nest in this particular situation. Now, there's different types of malware, of course, that you would run into, where you might have malware that is like injected into a process and everything is running out of that injected process. But this one, actually, you can see the hierarchy. Chrome.exe was ran by Explorer at the same time that trustme.exe was run. Then we have cmd.exe, then we have connection host, and then net.exe running from it as well. So that's just really cool that all of this is back and it's running and life is good. Also, if we want to keep going, the malfind or DLL list works just like it always did. Syntax is a little bit different. DLL list, but you have to do --PID 5452, and then we can get all the loaded dynamic link libraries in for trustme.exe. And there is no command line invocation. It's just the raw executable for it. So that's neat. Once again, if you've taken my classes, you're going to see the same dynamic link libraries are loaded. It doesn't, ironically enough, it's not actually loading all the dynamic link libraries. There's 2 that Volatility missed, and I don't know why. But that's, once again, that's one of the reasons why you want to do live forensics, along with your memory forensics on a system as well. The final one that works now that I think is really, really cool is malfind. For a long time, malfind didn't really find anything. Like if you're running Meterpreter, if you're running some rootkits, it would actually pick those up. But they've actually gone through and updated malfind, basically looking at processes to make indications of what processes look sketchy. And sure enough, it basically lit up trustme.exe basically, I think 3 times. So we got it 1, 2, 3 hits. And then Search UI, which isn't any malware on this system, but it was able to quickly identify trustme.exe. So if you are a student of mine or someone that just likes labs and likes free stuff, I have updated the memory analysis lab. If you actually go to labs in your VM and you go to the memory analysis lab and you reload it, all of the cool hotness that I just did is now in side of the memory analysis lab. I haven't gone through this with a fine tooth comb yet. I literally just got it done about half an hour ago because I'm going through and updating all the tools and making sure that newer things are working or not working. But you'll see all the instructions for everything that I did. And yes, this is a public GitHub repository. You can just go to Strand.js Intro Labs. Once you're in Strand.js Intro Labs, you would go into Intro Class Files, go to Navigation, and you can go Memory Analysis right here. And there we go. So in here, we've got the instructions for extracting the memory dump. So we go through and extract volatility from the fine folks at Volatility. Then we run NetScan and what processes and connections are interesting. Then we run PS list to look at the process listing that I talked about. Then we run PS tree to look at the process hierarchy. Then we run DLL list on trustme.exe, and then we run malfind. So everything I just talked about is now updated and in the lab, and your VM should work. The only thing that you have to do to update the labs is just go to the root of C right here and delete intro labs. Do that again, right click, delete intro labs, and then just run lab update. And lab update will go to GitHub. It'll sync up all the labs, bring down all the files required for it to work properly. And now you can do this updated volatility lab. Now, some people will be saying, well, I'm not a student. I didn't take your class. This video is worthless to me. If you go to Google, using Bing to get to Google just because I know that Microsoft hates that, and that's just fun. And you do a search for, let's go John Strand, and do virtual machine, Antisyphon. So it's going to bring down this link right here with the download instructions that tells you to get VMware, and it tells you to get 7-zip. And here is a helpful link for you to download the VM for everything that I just did. So yeah, we've got a pay what you can class. We have a lot of really, really super cool training things, but a lot of what I do in these address-based layout randomization videos is free, and you can totally do this on your own. You don't need to necessarily take a class to actually do it. We have it all available so you can play with it. So that's what we're doing for address-based layout randomization today. Tomorrow, I'm going to go through and I'm going to update Velociraptor for the class as well, just making sure that everybody can do it. So if you want an EDR and something that you can play with, Velociraptor is really, really, really super cool. So we've got some comments and questions that I want to go over. What do we've got? We've got trustme.exe, NC Cyber Threat Hunter. This can't possibly be malware, right? A little bit on the nose with our malware in my labs. I want to make it very easy. If you're looking at most forensics, right? If I was to look at a system that was compromised, it would probably take me the better part of a day to go through and look through everything and make sure that I've got all my bases covered, especially if it's not compromised. If it's not compromised, it might take me 3 days, right? Because you start digging and you start getting a little bit crazy. But if I'm dealing with a system that's compromised, I can see the malware. I've got a good idea. I've got beaconing telemetry on Zeek data. It's probably a day to do analysis and doing memory on that particular computer system. Of course, there's going to be more work going back to Active Directory, finding other systems. But for the labs, we like to make these things really on the nose so people can do the labs in about 30 minutes. So they can get through it relatively quickly to get those salient core concepts that they would use. So yeah, we're a little bit obvious on the name. So, trustme.exe, totes legit on that as well. I looked into this a while back. So awesome. They did a version in Python. It's always been in Python. Actually, we just had the standalone executable that you could use. As far as I can tell, it's always been Python. Who knows? There might be a Perl version out there that's really old, but it's always been in Python as far as I know. Is there a way to get the SVC information from a memory dump offline? Generally, what you would have to do in that scenario, and just let me share my screen real quick. Let me share again, and we'll go back to my VM. we were to do that, you'd probably have to start looking at the dynamic link libraries themselves, right? So let's actually do that. So if we have an SVC host of interest here, let's say the process ID, we've got this one is, let's pick one up a little bit higher. Let's do 1180, okay? So I'm going to grab this process ID, and then I can run DLL list again, right? And then we can put in that specific dynamic link library. What was it? I got 1180. So we've got that one. So I'm going to rerun this command all over again. And we're going to run it instead of the process ID of our malware. We'll do 1180. And it's going to take a little while for it to run. What? Oh, crap. No, that's not going to work. I just completely blew everything away through my VM update. But you know what I can do? Because I do stupid things a lot, I can revert snapshot and then I can bring it back. So just give it a moment. But no, you can do DLL list on that specific executable. And if you're lucky, what you're going to get is the command line invocation. And if you get that command line invocation, sometimes that can be really, really helpful to identify what is the what is the actual services that were started off of, because you would see like an SVC host, I think it's K, and then you would see the individual processes or the services that were started by it. So once again, this takes a little while for it to run, but if you see an SVC host that's interesting, like my big thing is if I have an SVC host that's opening up network connections outbound from the system, yeah, that's weird. That's not something that you would normally see where you have SVC hosts making established connections outbound to other IP addresses, right? You're going to be seeing Search UI, TrustMe.exe, Chrome.exe, things like that, but you won't see a lot of SVC hosts making outbound connections. You'll see SVC hosts listening on ports. That happens all the time because RPC is started with SVC host. You would expect that, LSAS, all of those. But you don't see SVC host making outbound connections all that often. So here we go. So if we look at this particular SVC host, we did not get the command line invocation of it, but we did get the dynamic link libraries that were downloaded and we kicked through it. That kind of sucks. So that is a bummer. I'm not going to lie. Used to be able to get the straight up command line invocation. So that's a little bit of a step back, but hey, we'll take what we can get. But for some of these, you can see that this is more than likely MSV CRT. What else? Object linking and OLE auth32. So you can get an idea. This is more than likely a legit dynamic link library just by what it's actually loading. So yeah, that's a bit of a bummer. But once again, that's really one of the main reasons why we think it's so important for us to do a little bit of live forensics and do a little bit of that dead memory forensics to do the analysis on that as well. So what do we got here? Let's keep going. Some people are like, start downloading now. Yeah, the VM is large, but the VM has Windows. It also has the Linux Windows subsystem for Linux. I recommend snapshotting it because remember, Windows came out with an update that absolutely nukes the VM, blue screens the hell out of it, kills plug and play for some crazy reason. So snapshot it and keep a downloaded copy on a USB drive. So if it does, you can re-extract it. You can try to disable the updates, but you can only disable the updates for so long and Windows just kind of shows up. And I'm playing around with a host configuration to try to set all of the different update servers for Microsoft to come back to 127.0.0.1. But I'll probably do that for the next edition of the full VM. Probably will be easier for me just to create a new Windows 10 VM at that point as well. What do we got? I saw someone use memory dump to find a rootkit, even though the local machine said that everything was okay. Yeah, and that's actually something that actually happens quite a bit. In fact, on the news yesterday, talk about news, we were talking about a piece of malware that actually executed from PowerShell and specifically would try to go through and blind antivirus and any EDRs on there as well. So just, we see that. And once again, that's why we step back, right? We start with the network connections and we work at the processes and we kind of unfold that system. Another reason why it takes me like a day to do memory analysis on a system is they're not as clean as what we just looked at, right? On the memory dump that we did on the system, I totally shut down the browser and everything. Like there was no extraneous connections. And that's to make it easier for the student. Whenever I'm doing forensics, there's going to be like, 20, 30 websites that are up and running. And I've got to parse through those. But usually what I do is if there's any processes that are making dual connections, where there's a connection to an internal computer system and there's an external out to the internet, and there's a connection process hierarchy, like, we got, this trustme.exe makes an external connection. And then trustme.exe starts cmd.exe, and cmd.exe starts net.exe. And I just so happen to see a network connection out to the internal network. I'm going to focus on those types of things as well. So just check it out. John is the step-by-step guide for volatility. Yes, and that is out on GitHub and work with the VM as well. Tim J said, start downloading now. What's the best way to analyze processes? Go through each process and make sure it's safe. Don't do that. That's bad. That's bad, Ray. Don't do that. And let me show you why that's bad. If we were to do that, and this is straight out of the class. So like if we were to do that on a live system, let's go over here, right? Clean this out. And if I were to run, let's just do task list, right? Task list. These are all the processes that exist on the system. This is insane. To try to go through every single one of these processes to make a determination as to whether or not it's evil is just bad. It would take you till like the heat death of the universe to do this on a moderate sized network. So what we teach in the class, we actually set up malware where you learn like, okay, this is malware, this is it executing, this is it making a reverse connection. And we start with the network connections that are open on the system. So we would do netstat minus NAOB, start there, look for established connections outbound. And instead of looking at everything, we instead say, okay, we've got a connection here to a foreign IP address. So let's start at that connection. All right. So that's what we actually teach in the Intro to SOC core skills and Intro to Security classes. We really want people to focus on, what is the highest value bang for your buck in doing analysis on these systems as well. Can you recommend any books to get deep into volatility? If you really want to get deep into volatility, their GitHub documentation is phenomenal, right? So if you go to volatility, go to documents, gives you, quick start guide, how to get started in volatility. They also have amazing training. It doesn't look like they've had any training in a while. But if you actually go into the wiki for volatility, they get all the way in depth where you can look at exactly how volatility works and how the Python itself actually works as well. So you want Volatility3, you can go into GitHub as a tar gzip file, and you can look at the documentation. So it's absolutely just fantastic. I can't recommend it enough there as well. How is volatility working with the latest Windows 11 builds? No freaking clue. Honestly, I have no idea. I would have to go into the volatility documentation and look at it. By the way, this is the level of depth that it gets into, where it talks about things like the symbol tables and the templates that are used by Microsoft and pulling those different things down. Like you get into the weeds very, very quickly. And even how to write plugins and things like that. So yeah, you get in depth very, very, very quickly. So let me see what else we got. I haven't played it on Windows 11, and that's mainly because most of my students, especially in corporate America, I haven't seen a lot of organizations moving to Windows 11 yet. They will. But looking at Microsoft making these symbol lookup tables available, volatility hooking into them, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to do that. By the way, volatility does also work with Linux and Mac memory dumps as well, which I think is just really cool. What if there's nothing found in a process on OSINT for a new hash? Actually, that's really common. That's incredibly common. If you actually look at hash lookups, like if you go to VirusTotal or anything like that, vast majority of the time, if it's a targeted attack, that hash ain't going to pull up anything on VirusTotal. So a hash works really well if you're dealing with general run-of-the-mill botnets or just malware that's being spread, or like rootkits that are going back to evil state actors that have been identified and outed because they're reusing the same executable. Whereas if you're dealing with an attacker who's targeting your organization, usually the hash is going to be different for each instance. So if you look at Cobalt Strike, if we're using Cobalt Strike at BHIS or Brute Retel or Nighthawk or our own tools that we have, those tools are set up in such a way that they're going to a separate command and control server. So the hash is going to be very much unique for that individual engagement. So it really just won't work. Antisyphon, when is this running? Pay what you can. Not next week, but I believe the week after. If you want, just let me share my screen and we can bring that up. It's been kind of crazy. I'm still jet lagged a little bit from coming back from BrewCon. But if you go to Antisyphon and you go to Pay What You can actually look at live training. What is it? Calendar, and I'll tell you what classes are coming up. We have a bunch that are starting up with Wild West Hackenfest. But the big one that you want to be focused on is this one right here. This is getting started in security with MITRE and Black Hills Information Security. And I will share that in the link. Oh, there we go. So we fall into the black hole, and Ryan will pop that over for you and check it out. So really excited. And by the way, I'm teaching next week virtually my intro to pen testing class as well. How does an incident responder decide what memory analysis is appropriate? Always do a memory dump. So if you have a system that is suspect, you believe something's up, shenanigans are at play, then I recommend always getting a memory dump of that computer system. And the reason why is that's sort of another just bit of evidence. And it's better to have more evidence than less as you work through it. So if you can be like, I want NetFlow, I want full PCAP if you can get it, I want all of your domain controller logs, and I want to get memory dumps off the suspect computer systems, you're going to be in a great place. Michael McAllister said Yaroscan single process or an entire dump. It depends. Actually, this is getting into Kroll and Eric. I forgot Eric's name, but he wrote a tool called Cape. At least I think it's Eric. It's Eric Zimmerman, I believe is his name, who created Cape. And what happened with Cape is whenever you're looking at doing a forensics or an IR engagement, there's two different ways. And really, Eric kind of broke this wide open. So you can look at initial, really quick triage forensics artifacts. And that's what Cape is all about. What are the things that we always look at? So we can pull those off the system very quickly and start doing rapid fire analysis. And we can still do a full memory dump and a full hard drive dump of that system. So instead of us sitting around on our ass waiting to do forensics, we can get Cape artifacts off of that system very, very, very quickly, start doing analysis, and then have the full dump of the system so we can do full analysis on that as well. So with your Yaroscan, when you're looking at it, you can look at those high value things very, very, very quickly, but then you can run it over the entire memory dump as well. Do you have many tools that are utilizing eBPF that you've seen recently? Thinking about doing a little deep dive into eBPF and writing some tools. Awesome. So here's a couple. The first one, let me go back to screen sharing. All right. Is SpiderBat. SpiderBat is a Linux eBPF tool that is absolutely fantastic, and they have like basically a free version that you can use for individual. And then the big one, if you want to learn eBPF, is Sysmon for Linux. Sysmon for Linux is actually built on top of eBPF. So if you want to learn eBPF, these are two great projects to start. And if anybody wants to know what eBPF is basically the extended Berkeley packet filter. BPF was basically TCP dump filters. You could write BPF filters, but with eBPF, it's actually allowing us to get into kernel calls and what's happening on the system as well. So Graham, I hope that answered your question. So many skills to keep up with. Any recommendations on spaced reputation platforms, refreshing tools we don't use? Just find a cyber range and just have fun. And to be honest, a lot of the shit that I do here where I start running through labs is I'm old and I forget things. So really the internet and YouTube and Twitch now is my memory. So that works pretty well. So use CyberRange as much as you can as well. A Heat Death Universe was a band name. That's nice. Is there a way to identify and dig further into suspect dynamic link libraries with taskless space /m or something else native on Windows? So this gets into one of the videos that I'm going to be coming up with is there's two tools that you can look up. Is Process Explorer is a really, really good one. You can do full analysis and you can dump memory of individual processes with it. And then there's another tool called Process Hacker. And Process Hacker is a fantastic utility that does a lot of the stuff that Process Explorer does. So if you actually want to dig into those individual processes, those are two things that you can use to dig into them as well. Day to day as an analyst, how likely are you to use this tool? So Dog of Snow. So let's start with the old. Like if we're looking at 2.6 version, not very likely. You would use it. I mean, I would recommend anytime you're doing IR, you would be using volatility. You just would. It would suck, and I would probably try to augment it with some live forensics commands and save the output of those commands. But now that we're getting into Volatility 3 and what Volatility has done with it, I'm now saying this is going to become an absolutely essential tool. And with my class and what I'm doing with it, and also there's other classes that use Volatility as well. One of the big differences is at Antisyphon, we actually donate to the Volatility project because it's kind of shit to use a bunch of open source tools in a class that you charge for and not give back to the community, don't you think? So we try to give back to those people because these people are doing this for free, right? They do this as a job in some situations. So we need to find a way to give back. But with the newer versions of Volatility being as effective as they are, yeah, it's now day to day. If you have a system that you think is suspect, you can use something like F response to dump the memory off of that computer system, pull it back. Do some analysis on it as well. So yeah, it's way high in my list of tools that I would use on a day-to-day basis as well. Sorry, a little late, but if you look for signs of privilege escalation, how would you suggest differentiate between legitimate and malicious attempts? So that's interesting. And usually with privilege escalation, you more than likely wouldn't be using volatility because remember that memory dump is a snapshot in time, right? It's just quick in time. What you normally would be using is sysmon. So sysmon, you'd be spooling off what are all the commands that the attacker is running, and then you would see that privilege escalation technique being utilized, like somebody trying to use, let's say, Mimikatz, or Meterpreter trying to use get system to elevate privileges through a variety of different ways or specific processes. So other utilities would be better for identifying those privilege escalation techniques than doing memory analysis. You would still use memory analysis, right? Because the memory analysis will help you find the malware, it'll help you find the network connections, it'll help you find the IP addresses. So there's a lot of indicators of compromise that you can get out of volatility. But as far as like the techniques the attackers use to do privilege escalation, more than likely it's not going to show up as well. What else do we got here? How bad does a suspected incident have to be to start getting memory dump? Or should we be doing this every alert? I wouldn't do this for every alert. Dog for it. I would not do this for every single alert. I would recommend doing this if you believe that your EDR XDR has failed you. If you're getting network alerts that's saying, hey, there's somebody that's going out to this weird domain in like New Zealand or something like that, right? So with that, you would basically say, okay, EDR is not giving us anything. Let's dump the memory and let's go deeper. So kind of Inception, since we're talking, awesome directors, Stanley Kubrick, and who didn't direct Inception, but I'm saying awesome directors, right? So what you would do is you would dig into it. Or if your EDR triggers and it says, hey, there's totes malware on this computer system, yeah, I would probably jump in and I would dump the memory off of that computer system. So why pick on New Zealand? Because you're here. That is the specific reason, Brian. I've got, gotta throw some love your way. So yeah, by the way, I've got to get down there. I don't know how open the country is at the moment, but I've got to get down there. I visited Max in Germany, so I need to come down and visit you in New Zealand at some point as well. Can Volatility3 give you more than sysmon logs? Yes and no, right? If you're looking at volatility, you can actually do like file carving. You can do all kinds of different things with volatility, where sysmon isn't going to allow you to dump and carve and pull processes out of memory. Volatility will. But is volatility going to give you full command execution for absolutely everything? Probably not. So it's not an issue of like an either or, Joshua. You're going to be looking at both of these tools complementing each other. So sysmon is going to get you process execution, network execution. It's going to give you DNS resolution. You're not necessarily going to get that from volatility, but volatility will get you what dynamic link libraries were loaded in a process. Volatility will give you, like, allow you to carve data out of the process directly. You might dump the whole process from memory down to a file, and then you could do strings analysis. You can't do that with sysmon. So you're not going to be looking at these as like two separate tools that are against each other. You're really going to want to like use them both. So Ricardo asked, where else is this live? Right now, getting comments fed to me from LinkedIn, where you're at. It's also coming from YouTube, and it's also coming from Discord and Twitch. So it's coming everywhere. And by the way, please take a moment and subscribe, because the only thing we're giving you is free information. Graham asked, curious to hear your thoughts on learning Rust. I know Mark Rasanovich came out and said he thinks new projects should not be written in C. They should be written in Rust. One of the big reasons why everyone's saying that, and Linus Torvalds is saying the same thing, right? Because Rust is going to be in the Linux kernel 6.1, I think, is the one that's going to be shipping with Rust. And the reason why is Rust has a lot more protections, especially whenever you're looking at like, use after free memory protections, doubly linked lists, the way it actually handles memory leaks. And then I believe Rust also has some protections against speculative execution attacks. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that one. The point is, Rust has more protections in it than C. So if you're running C and you want to just completely screw up and open up memory and then have, buffer overflow, C is going to let you do that. It is. Now, whenever you compile, it may freak out if you're using like get s or something, or, or string copy without the proper format strings. It might freak out, but it's going to let you, as a language, shoot yourself in the foot. Okay. Rust has a lot more protections. Now, I suspect that Rust will also allow you to shoot yourself in the foot, but now we're at least shooting ourselves in the foot in more creative ways, which is really what we want. So Rust is cool, right? It's the new hotness. It's the new language. All the cool kids with the cool hats have it, and they're learning it. So, I mean, I got a tester that's learning offensive Rust. Also, there was a presentation, offensive Rust by BSD Bandit at the Hack RedCon. Hopefully those videos will be posted here shortly. So if you want to get kind of a look at Rust from an expert, from somebody that's awesome, yip, go check out BSD Bandit's presentation. I know Charles rocks the house anytime he presents. So please check that out. All right. So with that, hopefully you liked it today. Most of like what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is I'm going to be updating my labs and doing videos. So once again, like and subscribe, because that does something. I'm not exactly sure what that does. I know it doesn't make me money, because we're trying to suck at capitalism constantly, but somehow in the algorithms in the universe, karmatically, when I die, I'll get further in line in purgatory. Shit, I don't know. But like and subscribe. We appreciate it as well. Angels get wings when you subscribe, all because of you. I believe in angels, not the kind with wings. No, not the kind with halos, but the ones that bring you home when home feels like a strange place. And with that, let's get out of here, everybody. Thank you so much, and I will see you tomorrow.